I wanted to just spend 5 or 6 minutes. First of all, congratulations to Lisa Nelson and ALEC on this incredible conference. It's been spectacular, Lisa. Hats off to you. So, as you know, Arthur and I every year do the Rich States, Poor States 8 years in a row, and I think it's become the Bible in a lot of your states, and thank you for using it and employing the intellectual ammunition we provide. As many of you know, about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, I debated Paul Krugman. You all know Paul Krugman, the left-wing economist at the New York Times. And I thought I'd show you some of this stuff because we really had this big discussion about red state, blue states, and why we're seeing so much growth in the conservative states and so much exodus from the blue states. And I want to start this by saying this, that too often on our side of the aisle, there's just too many people are too glum and too grim about the situation we're in America. And I've got to say this, when I look at what's happening in the 50 states today, Arthur, we are winning. We are winning everywhere with our ideas. And it's so amazing. I mean, how many here are from the great state of Michigan? Any Michiganders? I mean, Michigan is now a right-to-work state. Amazing, right? How many are here from Wisconsin? Wisconsin. Wisconsin is now a right-to-work state. How many here are from Indiana? Indiana is now a right-to-work state. Now, that happened within 4 years. Three states that are in the Midwest, that are the cradle of unionism, became right-to-work, and that's, I think, in large part because of the work that ALEC has done in educating Americans about the importance of being a right-to-work state. How many people are here from the great state of North Carolina? North Carolina. What happened in North Carolina, I don't know how many of you followed what happened. I know you followed this, Arthur. An amazing story. North Carolina last year cut their unemployment benefits, cut the number of weeks eligible for unemployment benefits. And when they did this, and I talked to the governor, he said, look, we have the highest unemployment rate in the country, and yet every employer I was talking to said they couldn't find workers. And so the North Carolina legislature and the governor had the courage to cut those benefits, to cut those welfare benefits, and also to cut the number of weeks eligible. What do you think happened to the unemployment rate in North Carolina when they did this? The biggest decline of any state in the entire region in North Carolina when they cut those benefits. It's something other states should learn about. Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama are completely wrong on this. Unemployment benefits and food stamps are not a stimulus to the economy, they're a de-stimulus to the economy. One other state I wanted to mention, how many people are here from Nevada? Any Nevadans? Nevada this year passed, you aware of this, Arthur? They passed the first statewide school choice program. So now any child, regardless of income, can go to any school of their choice. I mean, is that an amazing thing or not? So let me just show you a couple of charts about the economy, because that's what we're here to talk about. First of all, if you want to annoy a liberal, show them this chart. This shows what's happened under Barack Obama versus Laffer Reagan economics that happened in the 1980s. These two presidents both came into office during a severe economic crisis. Reagan believed in the philosophy that government is not the solution, government is the problem. Barack Obama's philosophy has been that government is the solution to every problem. So we've had $7 trillion in new debt, we've had stimulus plans, we have cash for clunkers, we've had the Fed flood the economy with cheap money, tax increases on the rich, everything that the left could possibly imagine. We did that in the last 6 years. And if you really want to show why our system of free markets is so superior to their system of socialism, look at this, that if we had had the kind of recovery over the last 6 and 7 years under Obama that we had under Ronald Reagan, the U.S. GDP would be $2.74 trillion larger today. $2.74 trillion. If we prorated that to every family, that means every single family in America would have $15,000 to $20,000 more income. And that is the sickness of the economy. This is not a healthy economy right now. And the same thing is true with jobs. If we had had the kind of pace of job creation under Barack Obama that we had under Ronald Reagan, we would have 8 million more Americans working today. That's an awesome statistic. Now let's talk a little bit about what's happening in the states. And some of you have seen this before, but it is summarizing, Arthur, our 400-page book in one chart, which is the 4 largest states in the country, Texas, Florida, California, and New York, account for 1/3 of the population. 2 of those states, I hate to say this, California and New York, are deep blue states with 13.3% income taxes. They are forced union states. They are states that don't allow drilling. They are states that, by the way, let me just, before I forget, how many people are here from the great state of North Dakota? Any North Dakotas here today? One or two. I just have one message for you. Drill, baby, drill, because what you're doing for this country is unbelievable. Anyway, California and New York don't allow drilling, Texas and Florida do. Here's the bottom line here. For every job that has been created in the last 15 years in California and New York, 3 to 4 jobs have been created in Texas and Florida. Now, how do you explain that if you're a liberal? And by the way, I confronted Paul Krugman with this very chart 2 weeks ago out in Las Vegas, and I said, Paul Krugman, you're going to have to explain this one to me because these states like California and New York have done everything that you've told them to do. And you know what he said? Steve, there's a very simple explanation for this. People are moving to the south and to these other states because of the weather. Because of the weather. He said, because of air conditioning. And I said, well, gee, that's interesting because we're now, right now, in one of the most beautiful, idyllic areas in the entire universe, right? San Diego, California. And I said, Paul Krugman, please explain to me why people are moving from San Diego to Houston if it's because of the weather. And he had no response to that. Our ideas matter, and this shows that. And then this is an even more amazing one. This is a new one we just put together. The last 10 years, this is, people vote with their feet. And by the way, is Rich Vedder here? Richard, where are you? Stand up, Richard. This is the guy who was the inventor of this stuff on where people go to and where they leave. And Richard, you've been a pioneer on this. And this shows what Richard has shown for the last 30 years. Look at New York and California. People are leaving those states and they're going to the states that ALEC and Art Laffer and Larry Kudlow and Ronald Reagan, those kind of policies are the ones that work. People are voting with their feet. I want to just show you one other one that I think is really interesting. Where do people want to move from? This was a Gallup poll that was done about a year ago. Look at the state. This was a poll of, if you could move away from your state, would you? Look at the top states that people want to move out of. Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Maryland, Connecticut, Illinois. People are leaving. If their ideas work so well, why does everyone want to leave? And of course, the answer is because they're impoverishing their own citizens. Final point I'm going to make on this is just, this is a great one. I just love this chart, Arthur. I had to show it. I mean, Rick Perry has one hell of a story to tell, right? If you look at the United States from 2007 to 2013, a 6-year period. How many Texans in the room, by the way? How many Texans here? Texas created more jobs from 2007 to 2013 than the other 49 states combined. Wow, that's an amazing accomplishment. And I guess I'm just going to conclude my remarks by saying this. The goal of America and the goal of every one of you as a state legislator in your state is not to make America look like New York and, unfortunately, California, but let's make America look like Texas. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Stephen. And now I think these questions have to go to you. You need equal time.
Well, I don't want equal time. I'll just say I agree with everything he said.
Well, I agree with everything he said, but I was really happy to see that California was not on the state where people most like to leave from. However, I think we've kind of had our exodus, so let's
By the way, over the last decade, sorry to interject, but this is an amazing statistic. In the last decade, you know this one, Arthur, 1.5 million more Americans left California than came into California. That's probably the first time that's ever happened ever in the state of California. It shows what happens when you get all the policies wrong. And by the way, we're seeing this around the world right now. I mean, look, the bankruptcy of Greece. Why is Greece going bankrupt? Because it's socialist. Why is Puerto Rico going bankrupt? Because it's socialist. Why is Connecticut, my home state of Illinois, going bankrupt? Because they're socialist. Why is Detroit going bankrupt? Because they're socialist. We've got to pound the left with our message right now and pound young people and tell them and educate them that these ideas of the left, of bigger government, higher taxes, pro-union policies, are impoverishing their own citizens. California, by the way, one statistic that's amazing. Do you know what state in the country has the most income inequality? California. California does. California is a state of rich and poor where the middle class is leaving. It's a travesty what's happened to this great state.
Well, then let me get into this one question. It's kind of apparent in states. I'm just going to go into this because we've kind of using up our time here, and so we are discussing the book that's in the Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of Wealth of States, how taxes, energy, and worker freedom change everything. And one of the one of the most, I think, most poignant messages that you can get from watching what's going on across the nation in New York and in California, they are both having targeted programs. You know, Startup New York.
Right.
Startup New York should be it should resonate only because it's an admission that they need to do something to bring business back. So how do these targeted programs work overall as opposed to a tax increase? Are they really producing jobs? Are they jobs to keep? Are they, when you do a region versus, or you select an industry, how does that affect the economies of these states?
I'll try that. One of our co-authors, Rex Sinkfield, does a column in Forbes. He looked at Startup New York, and I don't remember the numbers exactly, but I think it was for every job Startup New York produced, it cost $3 million or something. And it's just the most inefficient, horrible thing. If you guys get a chance, you got to look up Rex Sinkfield's column on Startup New York. It's the most amazing column you've ever seen, but it's been a total failure. The only thing it's not been a failure in is it does tout that taxes matter, and taxes matter a lot. And as my dear friend Larry Gatlin says, it ain't rocket surgery.
Well, look, the fact is, if any business is stupid enough to really believe they can move to New York to save on their taxes, they belong in New York, right? Because the truth is, New York has the highest taxes in the country. And for, Cuomo to run around the country saying, come to New York. Now, it's true, they will, for the first 5 years, you won't pay any tax if you move there. And then the 6th year, you get crushed, so.
Yeah, I would say if you were doing anything that was on a permanent basis, you'd have some issues.
At my age, by the way, that sounds pretty attractive.
Okay. In one of your chapters, chapter 7, for those
You read the book?
I actually read the book. I did read the book. And believe me, it's a wonderful book. It's not a totally easy read, but I think if you look at the graphs and then you go back and try to find out what's going on with this and why these differences, it's all 50 states.
Yep.
But in chapter 7, you make the assertion that higher tax rates are not synonymous with higher tax dollar revenues. Higher dollar tax revenues are not synonymous with higher dollar government spending.
Yep.
And higher dollar government spending is most definitely not synonymous with greater provision of public services. Right. And you do compare California and Texas, where California has 65% more revenues, but Texas is only having 25% less, or California has 65% higher taxes, but Texas only has 25% less revenues. Yep. So how does that work?
Well, basically because rich people who do pay taxes leave. You find people in California using all sorts of lawyers, accountants, deferred income specialists, et cetera, so they can get less taxable income and thereby pay less in taxes as a share. And you have a lot higher unemployment rate in California than you do in Texas. And lastly, you have lower participation rates in California than you do in Texas. All of those are what we call the leakage. It's sort of an automobile example. When you go from horsepower in an engine to horsepower at the wheels, we use the example there that it's a parasitic leakage, and that first leakage is between tax rates and revenues. Mm-hmm. The second leakage comes between revenues and spending. And the third leakage comes between spending and the provision of public services. It is amazing. California has 65% higher tax rates on average, 25% higher revenues. On spending, they're about equal with Texas. And on the provision of public services, Texas has about 25% better provision of public services than does California. The example I use and I love is California teachers are the single highest paid teachers in the nation. And according to the NAEP scores, which is the Department of Education testing of 4th grade and 8th grade math and English across the country, California is the 4th worst education state in the nation. Highest paid teachers, right. 4th worst. And by the way, just in full disclosure, the 4th worst is California's best performance in the last 20 years. They usually are 2nd worst, only being beaten out sometimes by Mississippi, Louisiana, or New Mexico. But
there is a negative correlation, believe it or not, between how much states spend per capita and education test scores and graduation rates. So when the teachers' unions keeps with this message, spend more, spend more, spend more, spend more, it actually doesn't work. There's no evidence whatsoever. In fact, if anything, the evidence swings the other way. My favorite statistic from that chapter, which Arthur put all this data together, it's an amazing statistic. To build a mile of highway, right, in California costs, I don't remember the exact number, something like $400,000. To build a mile of highway in Texas costs like $150,000. So it's not that Texas spends less. They're not getting worse public services. They're getting better public services, even though they spend 50% less. And here's the thing. There is a lesson here for every state legislator in this room. Before you ever look at raising more revenues, start looking under the hood. Start looking at the way that you're spending money, because I guarantee you, in every state of the union, you could save 10, 20, or 30% on the provision of services just by making them more efficient. I don't think there's any question in my mind.
Okay, one of your chapters could have been titled "Beware of Government-Sponsored Research," and in that you suggest it's difficult for government-sponsored researchers to overcome their own self-interest due to who's hiring them and they're being paid. I can cite our failed high-speed rail project as one glaring example, and why this project keeps chugging down the lane. I have my own reasons as to why I think that is, but explain this to me.
Well, we titled the chapter, being a little tongue-in-cheek, if we can, "Au contraire, mon frère." You know, here you have professors, and I is one, so forgive me, but they teach in public universities. They get funds from people who enforce exactions, taxes. They are completely separated from the donors, so they don't even know the names or anything like that. They get these monies, and they work in a tax-exempt organization, a 501c3, which are all universities. Right. Would it surprise anyone here that people argue cases in favor of their own self-interest? Right. And that's what they do. And I forget who was the California governor, ran for governor back in the 1920s. But his quote was...
Before my time.
Well, the phrase was, "It's very hard to convince someone of something when his ignorance is the reason for his being paid." and you know, with professors, it's classic. These are the most highly educated people with the wrong answers all the time. With the single exception of Richard Vedder over there, it's really true. I think what you should do on all of these things is there's no reason for universities to be 501c3s. Yep. There's no reason for anything to be a 501c3, to be really honest with you. If you want to give money, give it and pay your taxes and give the money to the place you want to do. Don't give because of a tax break.
You know, the best example of this is what's happening with this climate change issue, where the federal government is now spending $6 to $10 billion a year giving it to climate change researchers to come up with the conclusion that there's a crisis happening, right? And so it's no surprise that when you give these professors and these researchers the money, and you say, just come up with a conclusion that shows us this crisis is happening, you get a big bias in the research. And that's one reason. Lisa, you promised me this is off the record, so I can say this to you all. The biggest scam in the last 100 years is global warming. It is the biggest scam that we've ever faced, and it's precisely because of this perversion of science that we're not getting honest scientific researches, because the researchers go where the money is. Yep.
Well, that makes sense. And since California's two big issues are global warming and legalizing marijuana so that we can collect taxes on it, I will keep you all posted. I mean, the rest of the world's dealing with Greece and Iran and things going on in China, and this is our focus.
Well, Washington, D.C., I don't know if you all saw this 6 months ago, we legalized pot for the first time. So this makes it official that Washington, D.C. is now America's only official work-free drug zone.
Well, yeah, work-free. Work-free drug zone. I love it. I love it.
Oh, that's great, Steve. Consider that line stolen.
That was good. That's really good.
Work-free drug
Well, there's a
zone.
lot of states looking at this on an initiative basis, and a lot of them have done, and I just want to prepare you all, if you're not one of those states, that a lot of them have legalized for medical use. The biggest problem is you can't have a bank account, and you can't keep records. So We got to figure out how you get the cash for tax receipts. A big issue, because the feds can seize the bank accounts and get the records. So this is something that's probably coming nationwide, and y'all need to pay attention to it. It's a major problem. But I will get off of California, but I'm here because I want to talk about it a little bit. But what is the relationship between the size of the tax base and the size of the tax rate? And why is it that some taxes are more punitive than others?
Well, incentive effects, I mean, are all rolled in here. I mean, again, if you tax people who work and you pay people who don't work, do I need to say the next sentence to you? You know, the other one that's equally as true is if you tax rich people and give the money to poor people, you're going to get lots and lots of poor people and no rich people. If you have two locations, A and B, you raise taxes in B and you lower them in A, producers and manufacturers and people are going to move from to. You know, it really is that simple. That's where the economics comes out. Can I introduce to our co-author, Travis Brown is here as well. Steve and I and Rex Sinkfield and Travis Brown wrote the book, The Wealth of States. And Jonathan Williams is also our co-author on the Rich States, Poor States here at ALEC. So they deserve to be here much more than I do. So.
A lot of states, or the higher tax states, tend to tax the stationary object. You know, because if a business can relocate or people can transition out of state relatively easily. But if you've got the businesses with the big capital improvements or land-based or something that just can't move quite readily, they tend to be taxed the most heavy. What is the likelihood that they're going to eventually be leaving as well?
Well, the example I think we used in the book was Chevron here in California. Mm-hmm. And the tax has gotten up so high that, you know, all the pipes and all the facilities are here located. They can't go anywhere. And they've raised the tax so much so that I think one of the things that's happened recently is one of those facilities of the refineries broke down and didn't produce, and they can't replace it. And so I think gasoline prices in California are like 30% higher than any other state around because they've got to bring all of their refined, because they've taxed the situation so much that the refineries here in California have literally shut down. And I mean, and I think you know more about that than I do.
Well, I pay it at the pump, believe me.
It's huge at the pump.
Almost
I mean,
$5 a gallon.
Here, with the price of oil falling by 50%, and the price of gas here in California is over $4 a gallon. In Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm not bashful, I'm from Nashville. In Nashville, Tennessee, I think we pay $2.20 a gallon. And we actually are allowed to drive.
Yeah, that's true. You are.
Yeah.
We actually sit in traffic and burn it up.
Yeah.
Because we can't have roads because we want bicycles.
A work-free drug zone. I love it.
Work-free drug zone and bicycles.
Richard Vedder and I did a piece in the Wall Street Journal. What was that, Richard? About 6-9 months ago, where we looked at what's called the Gini coefficient, which is the level that the left used of a measure of income inequality by states. And what we found is that the conservative states that have free market policies have much more income inequality than states that are liberal. So even by their own measure, you know, liberals Hillary Clinton wants to talk about fairness and reducing the gap between the rich and poor. Their policies make the rich richer and the poor poorer. We're seeing that on the national level right now. By the way, Nancy Pelosi, go away. You know, we're seeing this on the national level right now. The biggest increase in inequality we've seen in any 6-year period in the United States history is the last 6 years with Barack Obama's policies, because the rich have gotten richer, the middle class has seen no gains at all, and the poor are getting poorer. So their policies fail. I want to make one other quick pitch when you talk about, you know, worse taxes versus better taxes. We've just done a study at Heritage. It's also part of the new Rich States, Poor States. How many of you live in a state that has a death tax? Raise your hand. Not that many. If you are in a state that has a death tax, it is killing your state's economy. We look at the evidence, and you did this in Tennessee. States that have death taxes, because the easy thing, anybody with wealth, anyone who's a millionaire, is not going to die in a state and give up, you know, 10 or 15% of their estate. They will move out. They will move their businesses. Every state in America should be death tax free.
Can I just say that Travis and you and I and Rex have also just finished our book, The Wealth of States, the sequel. which covers a lot of other ones, one of which is the death tax. In Tennessee, we had the death tax, the gift and estate tax. We just got rid of it. In looking at it, we have federal data on death tax, states being taxed, federal data. If you look at states with the death tax and states without it using federal data, the number of people filing death tax returns, estate returns, in states with estate taxes is about half as large as the number of filers in states without one per 100,000 population. And the average size of the estates in the states that have death taxes is about half the size of those in states without it. It's just astounding. The one I love most of all, anyone from Ohio?
Yay.
I'm going to date myself. There was a guy named Metzenbaum from Ohio, and he's my hero. Howard Metzenbaum was the senator from the state of Ohio. He was Mr. Death Tax himself, always going for the estate tax, raising it, all that. 6 months before he died,
He moved to Florida.
he moved from Ohio to Florida to avoid the death tax. You know, his movement was the right thing for him to do. His policies were the wrong thing. It's sort of like John Kerry and putting his yacht in Rhode Island.
Well, you know, we ought to have a policy in every state in America of no taxation without respiration, right? I mean, it's that simple.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
I love you, Steve.
Yeah, you're good at this. You're good at this. It kind of brings home is that those who are stuck or really don't have a lot of wealth can't really afford to move out of state, so they get
That's
taxed.
exactly right.
The wealthy people will flee, and we are seeing that happen with businesses, with individual personal income tax here in California, as well as now, you know, with a lot of other things, with our Chevron.
Yeah, Chevron is a tragic case. And with the failure of the plant now, with gas prices being worried, it's just why?
Well, you should see our electricity rates. So these are all taxes from the global warming. And the reason I think you all need to pay attention to this, whether you think you're on the right path or the wrong path, when you see Nancy Pelosi on the national stage, you need to take heed. It is California policy coming your way, and that's Barack Obama, and that's Nancy Pelosi, and that's what you all should have gotten from that example. And it is coming your way. That a lot of the policies that they've implemented or that have been implemented here are irreversible. I mean, you know, because once you get the industry moving with it and everybody on stage and everybody deciding, okay, well, we've got to change our business model, make our capital investment, you cannot roll it back. Because then you have no business partners that want to deal with you. So nip it in the bud. The last thing I want to ask, because this is really important and we don't have that much time, how do we use ALEC Laffer Competitive Index as an advocacy tool for states like myself and states like others where you're kind of in the minority and get the most bang for our buck? Well, we're definitely, but I'm the highest ranking Republican in the state. So there you go. How do we get the most bang for our buck, and how do we use this tool?
Steve, you want to go try that?
Well, look, blue states, how many of you represent a blue state? Raise your hand. A lot of you do. I mean, blue states have a choice, a very tough choice now. They either have to change or die. I'm from the great state of Illinois. How many people from Illinois here? A few. I mean, a great, great state. You know, Chicago is one of the great world-class cities in the world. It should be one of the fastest growing. It should be Hong Kong of the Midwest. And yet it is being destroyed year after year after year by these bad policies. They do exactly the opposite of what we recommend in our book. Or Connecticut. Anybody here from Connecticut? I mean, Connecticut is how many times have they raised tax in the last 5 years? I mean, they keep raising their income tax and they keep running.
And the thing that's amazing is a lot of these states brought in the income tax with Republican governors.
Exactly. I mean, low Weicker. So my point is these states have a very serious choice ahead of them. Illinois, what's happening
Republican
right now
there
in
too,
Illinois
by the
is
way.
an amazing story. Bruce Rauner, one of the great governors in America, is basically taking on, it's not even a Democratic legislature in Springfield, it's a legislature that's run by the teachers' unions. And this is a battle of the titans right now, and Bruce Rauner cannot back down. He has got to stand up to these unions. I'll give you one statistic that's amazing about how dysfunctional some of these states have been. In Illinois today, 25 cents of every dollar, of every tax dollar, is used not for roads, not for schools, not for ambulance service or police service or corrections or the kinds of things that we want, parks or things like that. 25 cents of every dollar is already used for pensions, for retired teachers and retired public employees. Why would anybody want to move to a state where 25 cents of every tax dollar you pay, you don't get any services from? And that's happening in one state versus another unless, and by the way, you have the same situation obviously in California where these cities are going bankrupt. Pension reform has to be a very, very high priority in these states.
Well, we have 15 seconds. Wrap it up.
Go for the gold. Always go for the North Star. Go, in Ohio, there are 1,450 income taxes. It's hard to roll it back, as you say. It really is difficult. But go for the gold. Use the North Star. Go for the proper policies. There's plenty of time to compromise when you get into legislative, but always go for the principled position, and that will really carry you a long, long way.
My last point is, we found in our book that we have 9 states in the United States that have no income tax. Those states are just clobbering the other states, right, especially the high-tax states. So here's something that Arthur and I and Travis and Richard Vedder have been proselytizing on for 25 years, and I think we're getting close. We need a 10th state in this country without an income tax, and that ought to be either Ohio, or it ought to be Georgia, or it ought to be North Carolina, or it ought to be North Dakota. And let's have a prize, Lisa Nelson, a $50,000 prize to the legislators in the state that can provide a no income tax environment. Abolish the income tax. You're going to see so much growth and so much prosperity. Let's do that. Let's have 25 states that have no income tax, and let's have 48 states that have right-to-work policies. Only New York and California don't get a board.
Well, thank you very much. I want to thank ALEC CEO Lisa Nelson and Ron Nearing for inviting me here. And thank you all for coming to California. We're a great state. We will be back. I'm not doing this just because I like the abuse. This is a fabulous place. I grew up here, offered every opportunity in the world. I came here in the 60s, and I'm trying to roll it back. So thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next governor of the great state of California.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank
Great to
you.
be with you.